What are some serial killer facts? Facts about serial killers that you find extremely interesting. Pee Wee Gaskins, most prolific serial killer in SC, drove around in a hearse with a bumper sticker that read, "I haul dead people." He told people that he needed it to take the bodies of people he killed to his private cemetery, and #X200B, he claimed to have killed between 100 and 110 people. Edit, a typo. When police eventually came to the house of Ed Gein, they found an absolute pigsty. Gein had been living alone since the death of his brother in a barn fire. It's speculated that Gein may have killed him, and had let much of the house go into disrepair. They found countless body parts from his various grave-digging excursions, including a bag of wilted meows and, of course, the infamous skin lampshade and half-finished woman's suit made of human skin. There were maggots living in old dishes in the kitchen. It was the type of disorganized mess that you would expect from a man who spent his nights completely disconnected from reality. All except one room, his mother's room upstairs, remained pristine, except for dust that had collected, and seemingly untouched from the time of her death years earlier. He had such a fear or respect for his mother that he was afraid to set foot in her room long after she had died. He claimed to hear her voice criticizing him from time to time. This was the central experience that inspired Norman Bates' character to maintain his mother's home image in Psycho. Also, a fun fact about Gein: in Taxi Driver, Travis Bickle makes an offhand comment when leaving a diner that he had a cup of coffee and a slice of apple pie with cheese on top. In exchange for details to investigators after his capture, Gein requested the same meal. In the John Wayne G case, there were so many bodies crammed underneath the house that the bodies melted together and the bones had to be sorted for more than 2 years to put together the full skeletons. The Hillside Stranglers picked up a young woman to murder. Then they discovered that her father was Peter Lorre, a legendary Hollywood character actor. They let her go because they feared that killing a celebrity's daughter would bring too much attention down. I think the fact that Ed Gein only killed 2 people is amazing because he is one of the most well-known serial killers. Jeffrey Dahmer gave the people in his apartment building sandwiches that could have possibly been made from his victims' flesh. Jeffrey Dahmer, towards the end right before he got caught, had so many bodies in his apartment that he ran out of room and stored one victim in his bathtub. He proceeded to shower over him every day for a month. Think about that, straddling over a rotten corpse to get fresh and clean for the day. Unreal. Edit, anyone wanting to see the pic referencing this, in one of the comments there are 3 links, click the last one and in the 6th row on the left you can see bathtub, shower in background. Warning: very graphic. Thank you to the person that pointed this out. New to Reddit, hope I did this right. Pedro Alonso Lopez pleaded guilty to the murders of 100-plus girls and only received a maximum sentence of 16 years, as that was the maximum possible sentence in Ecuador. He was released despite promising to continue killing but disappeared shortly after. The serial killer Bela Kiss liked to pickle people in barrels stored in his basement. Someone figured it out but they couldn't get him because he was fighting in World War I. By the time they tracked him down he had disappeared and left a dead guy in his hospital bed. He supposedly joined the French Foreign Legion and deserted that too, and I think history loses track of him after that, with the exception of one possible sighting as a janitor in New York. The janitor disappeared before anyone could confirm it. I have a family member who briefly dated this guy. https://en.m.wiki.org/wiki/john_edward_robinson. She almost but not quite fit the profile of his victims. One time when he picked her up, her adult son was visiting the house, met him, and shook his hand. He ghosted her after that. Also, my mom was living in a mobile home park in Wichita during Beatik's killing spree. My dad was deployed overseas. They had a big German shepherd who she would put outside for a little bit every night before going to sleep, and she said for a while she had to bring him in early because he would just go crazy, barking, growling, and snarling every night. Shortly after he stopped doing that, there was a BTK murder not too far from the mobile home park. Scary stuff. Some older homes in Wichita have a second landline installed by the door because he was notorious for cutting phone lines. People would come home and check the line by the door, then the other line, just to reassure themselves. The Golden State Killer, known at the time as the East Area Rapist, would often break into the homes of couples, making the woman tie up the man. He would stack dishes on the back of the man and threaten that if he heard the dishes fall, he would kill everyone in the house. Then he would rape the woman repeatedly and ransack the house for hours. At a community meeting about the rapist, a macho man stood up and went on a rant about how a real man would never let such a thing happen to him or his wife. The rapist proceeded to attack that man and his wife soon after, meaning he was attending the community meeting about himself. Durangel Vargas killed and ate at least 10 people. He only ate men because he said their meat tasted better than women's. He also wouldn't eat fat people because he thought they contained too much cholesterol. Journalist Vlado Taneski was caught when he reported on his own crimes and included information that hadn't been released to the public and only the killer could know. Edit. More info on Taneski. Of the 4 women who disappeared, 3 were found displayed signs of being viciously raped, molested and tortured before being strangled to death with a phone cord. Though the police had initially revealed that the women had been strangled, they had not said with what. Noticing that Taneski had correctly named the specific type of phone cord used, they arrested him on suspicion of murder. After questioning him, they obtained a search warrant for his home. His house was filled with pornography, and notes about the crimes. He had been carrying out the murders, then writing about them in great detail for the paper, as if taunting the police. I find it interesting that apparently the BTK killer installed alarms at several people's houses because of their fear of the BTK killer. I am surprised we don't hear more about Robert Hansen. https://en.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/Robert_Hansen. In popular culture, he would kidnap women and turn them loose in the Alaskan wilderness, where he would then hunt them down like animals and kill them. He didn't have the highest number of victims, but his method of hunting them for sport is absolutely insane. Mac Ray Edwards, he was a serial killer who worked for Caltrans. He'd kill his victims and then bury the bodies in places he would later help build the highways over. Not all his victims have been found, and many are very likely still under some of the California highways you may have driven over countless times. Edit. Thanks for the silver, I appreciate it. Smiley face. How Jack the Ripper always cut the throats of his victims in a way that stops blood from getting on his clothes. Whenever I read about the BTK killer waiting for one of his next victims to come home and then getting frustrated and leaving due to her running late, it gives me chills. That woman cheated death. Dennis Rader, aka BTK, bind torture kill, started communicating with police after years of silence in like 2004-ish. He had gone decades without being caught and once again started sending taunting letters and items to them. He asked them if he could be traced if he sent them his writings on a floppy disk, and they assured him through a communication in a newspaper that no, they couldn't trace him. He sent them a floppy disk and they found metadata linking to his church. He was arrested shortly thereafter. He was hurt that they would lie to him because he thought they had developed a rapport. Albert Fish would stick needles into his pelvis when he was masturbating, stick them so deep sometimes they would get stuck. He told this to police. They didn't believe him until they saw the X-ray. In the 70s there was a serial killer who was known for raping and killing women. He went on a dating show and the woman ended up choosing him, but luckily she cancelled the date just before. You can find a video on YouTube. It's really creepy. John Norman Collins used to pick up women on his motorcycle. The bodies of his victims, women, used to be dumped here and there, but they were always washed. Turns out he only killed women who were on their period. Also, he was referred to as John Norman Collins during his trial. He later changed his last name to Chapman because there was a lawyer in town whose name was John Collins, and this was a way to distinguish between them. Brazilian serial killer Little Petey murdered over 40 people in prison. He began by murdering the gang that killed his girlfriend and then stabbing his father, who was in prison for killing his mother. During a visit, he was well liked because he was considered a sort of vigilante avenger. Despite killing indiscriminately within prison, no difference between drug possession and a murderer. Because of Brazil's odd sentencing laws, he could only serve a maximum of 30 years, and is currently a YouTuber and ranch hand, I think. Many years ago I read the entire police report on the Green River Killer. I was fascinated by his attempts to cover his tracks by buying new car tires and destroying shoes and getting new ones after murders, to avoid leaving traceable tracks behind. Also fascinating that he took the jewelry off his victims and left it in the ladies' restroom at his workplace and got off on seeing the found jewelry on various women around the office. Aside from the killing, BTK is such a self-serving, pompous piece of garbage. He actually makes people fill out an application to write him in prison. Not necessarily the killer himself, but the use of DNA, ancestry websites to identify the chameleon killer and the Golden State Killer is fascinating. Edit. Just want to clarify since it seems like there's some confusion about how this is done. In both cases, they uploaded the killer's DNA as a fake profile to find family matches. Then they traced the family history from there and narrowed down the suspects by location, date, etc. Once they find a suspect, they test that person's DNA against the initial sample to confirm a match. Both cases have great podcasts where they go into detail about the process. Edit 2, link to Chameleon Killer, Bear Brook Podcast, https://www.bearbrookpodcast.com/closing parenthesis and link to Golden State Killer Podcast, https://case-podcast.com/case-53-east-rapist-1976-part-1/closing parenthesis. Jeffrey Dahmer didn't eat people with tattoos because he said the ink made the flesh taste weird. Be safe, get inked. That most serial killers have roughly average, often below average IQs, and their reputation as smart and difficult to catch is because of a couple of high-profile outliers and the fact that their victims are usually the sort of people who cops and society don't pay as much attention to.